Karan, good to go on your call.
So, ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to all of you, and welcome to this edition of the Economic Times Money Gurukul, where we are looking to analyze the budget together, understand all of its implications, what it means for us. As India looks to recover from the impact of the pandemic and to move forward with something resembling a degree of resilience, there were huge expectations from this year's Union budget. And we have with us a power packed panel of speakers and experts to fully decode and understand the budget's ripple effects on all our lives, whether it's personal and beyond that, also for tax planning for FY 2021, 2022, and how to rebalance your portfolio. Now, this is a budget, that's been set in the wake of an epochal, never before seen in our lifetime event. And the ramifications of it will probably be felt for generations to come. There's a lot of expectations from the budgets after the events of 2020, and there's a little bit in it for everyone to take away and to be happy from this year's announcements. And we'll be coming to that in a little bit. To set a bit of a background, though, in which this budget was unveiled, COVID has, of course, devastated societies. It has ravaged economies across the globe. And we've seen the economy falling a staggering 24% in the first quarter of this year, something unprecedented in most of our lifetimes. There was a relative recovery in the second quarter, with a fall not nearly as steep. So it's a bit of a compression. And that continued reversal continued with India's GDP growth estimated to decline by about 7.7% in FY 2021. Now, of course, we've seen demand growth going down. All of you know about that. We've seen private consumption go down. We've seen exports go down, obviously, to the sum of about 8.3%. And there's been no real incentive to grow capacity. For the government, they've been the major spenders. For all of us in our households, we've not really been spending a lot. And so perhaps it's time we rejig and relook at that. All of this equates to a challenging economic environment. And it's now been a year since the pandemic washed up on our shores. We're seeing some tailwinds in the form of a quick recovery in consumption from consumers. We've seen continued momentum in industries. We've seen increased digitization, and it's impacted all of our lives, not just industry. So it's providing some kind of an impetus for growth. So I'd say, in light of all of that, that the government's bid to revive the economy, to build a strong foundation through infrastructure spending, through investment in sectors in distress, and focusing on a growth formula, are addressing some of the lacunas that we are seeing across the economy by upskilling innovation, by jobs in the education space. And it's something of a holistic approach, which all of us need to really embrace going forward in this year. So now that I've proffered my bit to try and set some kind of context, let's shift focus a little bit to what the union budget holds in store for you and what it means for you. Let me tell you a bit more about the speakers that we have lined up for today. And it's a fine lineup, as always. With us is the incandescent Mr. K.S. Rao. He's the senior VP and head investor education and distribution development at Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC. Joining him is Harsh Rungta, who's founder director at ARIA. And as always, we have Amit Trivedi with us, who is author, speaker, blogger, and trainer. And together, I'm sure they'll be providing a lot of food for thought, a lot of inspiration and financial wisdom for all of us to really mull over. So over to you, gentlemen, to take things further.
Thank you so much, Karan. And it's great to be part of this webinar with ET Edge Money Gurukul. And I'm very glad and privileged to be with Harshji and Amitji. And good evening, friends. Thank you so much for making your time and joining us. And this session will go for next 90 minutes, and we will ensure to the best possible this budget, how it is relevant to most of us and how we can make a relevance. And I'll take you through a small presentation to start with. Thanks to Karan for setting the context right. Karan, I think you're perfectly right. This budgets, we in the generations need to remember probably 1991 budget when we were looking at 30 years back. We were all listening to Mr. Manmohan Singh and P.V. Narasimha Rao. This time it's Nirmala with Modi's guidance, and things are definitely looking very bright, pragmatic. Just to quote on Economic Times, Swaminathan ji, when he said, this is courageous and taboo breaking budget. And it's truly a big reforms budget. The big can also be a big G, it's a banking, insurance, and growth. There is a change in the growth, and biggest surprise for all of us is no taxes, and no change in the taxes is a big change for us, and no taxes is a big surprise for many of us. And this budget also used the converting the virus crisis into an opportunity, and it's a demand stimulus budget, and it is truly driving to the for us Atmanirbhar Bharat. And it's like, these big ideas like asset monetization are stage set for the glorious decade ahead for all of us. And it's truly, somebody said, it's a healthy, wealthy, and wise budget. Taking this from here, I will quickly run through, and I'll run through what exactly the budget has spoken, and then we can look forward from Harshji on the taxation. It's a great, and Harshji comes with a very rich expertise, and we all great admirers of him. We learn for every time we spend some time. It's a great learning for us. And later, Amitji, we can talk about how the roller coaster ride can become better, or volatile markets, what we can do differently. We will have a questions. And it's not the question of union budget, but we are talking today about your budget too. And it's a question is, we always look forward for the union finance minister's budget, but how many times we look forward to create our own budgets? Just to put honestly your hand on your heart and say, I create my annual budget, I have my spending plan, I have my investment plan, then I have my goals in place. Probably if it is not there, make sure this weekend you spend some time with your spouse, and look forward what is your family budget looking like. It otherwise it is always a difficult, we always look at union budget, it comes and goes, but it will not make much difference. And 2020 to 2021, things have changed in a very differently. It's a global pandemic, lockdown, and recession, and it was a year of virus to now year of the vaccine, and year of lockdown to year of opening up, year of recession to year of revival. And it's a time for us, like, year of stock market rally to year of rotations. Let us look at how this is a budget. And the government got a very difficult choice. Either, you need to work for economic revival and controlling the fiscal deficit. What you need to do, you can't do both at one go. And government decided on one side. And it's also a right, to put everything to perspective. And it's like, how we can look at these budgets, how the growth can happen. And there is a revenue expenditure, there is a capital expenditure. This time government is focused more on the capital expenditure, and which we look at this capex can work more for us in the days to come, in the years to come. In the short term, there is a revenue expenditure, long term is a growth orientation. And it's a very balancing budget. And I'll run quickly because it's all that you read and you would have heard from many channels. Let me not go through the numbers. And it's this budget has focused on the 6 pillars. The Sankalp was always Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's you have a health and well-being. There is a healthcare, there is a financial capital, and the privatization, to public sector banks and one insurance company, or creating an infrastructure with a capex of a little over 5.54 crores, and reinvigorating human capital. And there is 15,000 schools and 100 Sainik schools, so on and so forth. And there is a focus on innovation, there is a focus on agriculture, and last but not the least, minimum government and maximum governance. All this put into the perspective, these 6 pillars of Atmanirbhar Bharat. And these are the budgets which can create us very differently. This capital expenditure take in the next one decade to look at. Probably this is a stepping stone, and it's like, glorious decade ahead for India, which can throw us. I think GDP is pegged at for the financial year 2022. It could be 13 to 14%, but as we go forward for the rest of the decade, it could be 7 to 8%. And we will be talking in detail about this investment charter and taxation. By Harshji will talk about us. I will quickly skip on this, and how these taxes will play, and what is that you are going to save, and what is that you are going to invest. And it's like, Nirmala's budget, somebody said it is true to her name. Acronym is NIRMALA, Nirmala Ji. That is, N is the budget has given the newness, budget is set the nation first. And I is budget focused on the infrastructure, it is focused on the innovation. And R is focused on the reforms and reinvigorating the investment, human capital. And our YUM, the letter YUM spoke about monetization of the assets. Of course, it is driven by Modi ji. And A is truly, it's aspiring India, aspiring Indian, and it's an audacious one. And L is leading to the growth, and growth for not for the decade, but decades to come for India. And A is truly driving towards the Atmanirbhar Bharat. It is like, it's a Nirmala ji truly defined everything. But whenever it comes to the budget, I always look at where this budget would have come, we're going back to the centuries. Kautilya mentions about the individual budgets, how you need to manage your budgets. It is like it's clearly mentioned by Ardhashastra in Kautilya Ardhashastra. 25% of your income to be for the future needs, 25 for your personal needs, and 25 to be given to the charity, and 25 should be in the public and social causes. This is what all of us can aim for our budget to be. But all said and done, if it is not there, where your budget is going for your goals, or is for the capital expenditure, or it's for a revenue expenditure of your travel, luxury, and credit card bills. Let us look at what is that you can do differently. Budget is nothing but a simple plan. I'm sure this weekend, sit at home and work with your spouse, where your income and where your expense, what is your net worth statement, you can look at. And just and this budget, if you can create your spending plan, saving plan, I'm sure next year before union government comes to the budget, your budget is most comfortable place. You can do things very different. And of course, when it comes to the taxation, I think, again, Ardhashastra Kautilya says, paying tax is good for the country, saving tax is good for you. Between these two, how you play the right way. And, it's all that you need to do is, while paying your taxes, planning your taxes is the most one. You can create assets through the taxation. And, while you can utilize every benefit which is coming through the various sections which government gives to you. Whether, I think most of us, I presume, we are adapted to the plan one, and where you can look at your ITC, ITD, or ITE, then you have ELSS. This, I think, I'll ask Harshji is going to cover in detail. I personally am a great fan of ELSS. I would have myself created good wealth of the ELSS over a period of last 25 years of my career, putting my money. And you have various other sections to deal with in the taxation. Again, we leave it to this is a spectrum of Harshji, and we can look at. And this is my favorite one. Always part of the money you can donate to the charity. That also gives a taxation benefit. Then your money is going to the right cause, and you are getting benefit out of it. All that what you need to do is this: while you are opposing the taxation, it is not the year-end game, and it's the JFM is always, I call my insurance friends, it's the Josh full months. And for us, we all in insurance, we'll go for our taxation, we will go in JFM when our HR colleagues will ask for you need to give a proof of submission. Please do ensure, don't do for the JFM, do it from the April onwards, so that this tax planning can help you to create a true wealth. And and you can create that kind of it. And when Nirmala ji spoke about 6 pillars of inclusive development of India, what are your 6 pillars of your personal finance? It could be a quality of investments in managing the liquidity, ensuring you are getting a right return mix, and your risk management, and your asset allocation, and your consistency of investing. With this, I'll stop here, and I'll leave it to Harshji to invite and take the session forward to the Harshji. Harshji can talk about the taxation, what are the benefits we got, what are the things we can look at, and how things can shape it up. And just finally, to close, this entire budget is a mission to strengthen Atmanirbhar Bharat. If some of you are aware what is that Atmanirbhar Bharat, pronounced by our Prime Minister, strengthening that Sankalp when he said there were 9 pillars, which 9 pillars includes your nation first, doubling the farmers' income, and strong infrastructure, and healthy India, then good governance, and opportunities for the youth, education for all, and women empowerment, and last but not the least, inclusive development. All that put together, this budget is laying foundation to that Atmanirbhar Bharat. Let us look at, are we self-reliant before self-reliant India? And over to Arshji for taking over the session for the next presentation to on. And after that, we will have a Q&A, a lot of questions to both the speakers who come with a rich experience. But don't forget to give your questions on the Q&A box or chat box. We will ensure to answer as many questions as possible, and wish you all happy investing. And over to Harsh.
Thank you, Ra, for those kind words. And this year's budget reminded me of the famous saying, which is, that it is a shame to waste good crisis. And I think that is something that our finance minister seems to have heard. And I think if we look at what we have today, there are, I would describe this as a promising budget. Pointer doesn't seem to be working. So I would describe this basically as a promising budget. There are lots and lots of promises, and very clearly some of those promises are very exciting. I think what Mr. Rao has pointed out, uh, this crisis is perhaps what we faced in 2020, perhaps is a bigger crisis than the one that we faced in 91. 91 was a self-made crisis. The rest of the world was not in crisis. It was only India. I think 2020, it's a global crisis. And I think uh, the seeds of what we have done today were probably laid 30 years ago. And hadn't we done those reforms at that time, maybe today's reforms would not have been possible. I think with those things, what I would like to cover in this short presentation are points that are of relevance to us as investors. Uh, I want to talk about some of the things that the finance minister mentioned in her speech. Apart from the tax proposals, I think a very interesting thing she mentioned was creating an investment charter for investors across all financial products. We know today that most investments, still about 70% of our investments by households, is still in physical assets, whether it be gold or whether it be real estate. And I think the confidence that investors have in financial assets needs, it's growing. I think great work has happened, but I think it's the time has now come when we need a proper charter that lays down the rights of the investor and across financial products. So whilst the existing regulators, RBI with banks, SEBI with the markets, IRDA with insurance products, PFRDA with NPS, whilst they have their own systems, I think what we need is an overarching investor charter across all financial products, which need to be enforceable. Today we have charters. For example, we have a consumer charter with RBI, but it's not enforceable. So it effectively it becomes a feel-good statement. If it is not enforceable, uh, it is of no value. And I think what we really expect is, at least my reading is that the finance minister has given heed to the recommendation made by the Sri Krishna Commission, and we have probably an across the board consumers are a financial services consumers are who will look at all everything across all financial products. Of course, it will lead to turf issues with other regulators. I mean, you have seen the kind of things that have happened in the US. That's a great example. I mean, a lot of us, given the ubiquitousness of the social media, we have all heard of Elizabeth Warren and Senator Elizabeth Warren, and what a great job the US Bureau of Consumer Protection has done. I think something like that is very much needed in India. And this need not just be grievance redressal. I think when we think of investor charter, we think of complaints. I think you need a structural charter. The problems should not happen. Rather than solve problems, I think you need a regulator that will make sure that problems don't happen, that misleading products don't get solved. And all this, of course, it has to be within a time frame. Uh, but extremely promising to me as an investment advisor, to me, this was the pick of the budget. Obviously, the budget had lots and lots of things. From an investment perspective, for me, this was a pick of the budget. The other interesting point is that all of us know that bank fixed deposits up to 5 lakhs are guaranteed. They are guaranteed by an organization called Deposit Insurance Credit Guarantee Corporation. Now the issue is, so they are guaranteed, but when do you get that money? If you have insurance, when the event happens, you would expect to get your claim. But currently what happens is, if a bank, mostly cooperative banks, because no banks have been allowed to fail since the 1960s, The only banks that have failed are cooperative banks. But even in cooperative banks, why should the people have to wait before the claims are paid? So I think this streamlining of the DICGC provisions that will provide, very clearly promised by the finance minister, easy and time bound access. So I think what I would read it is that moment it goes into receivership, not receivership, I'm sorry, if it goes into the RBI framework and they, suspend operations, after that, within a given time frame, people should have access to the money. And because now the limit is 5 lakhs, most of the people will not be affected, provided they get quick access to that money. The other interesting and very important thing is the Single Securities Market Code. Today, the rules relating to Security Contract Regulation Act, the Depositories Act, the SEBI Act. There are lots of 3-4 acts, and I think combining that in a single act is really going to be very helpful. The other interesting thing is, of course, the gold exchanges. SEBI has been made the regulator. Already there is a clear movement towards, financialization of gold. You have the gold monetization scheme, hasn't been very successful so far. We were expecting some things to happen, but perhaps they may happen later. The sovereign gold bonds have done reasonably well. There are many issues with physical gold, especially physical gold made in India. Most of the gold that is being sold in the market is being imported. What constitutes standard delivery, things like that. I think there are many knotty issues around the gold markets that is preventing extensive standardization and financialization. Some of it has happened, more of it needs to happen, and I think it is a great step that SEBI has been appointed as the regulator. Again, very interestingly, and I think it is extremely interesting for the entire financial markets, is the announcement that there would be an institutional market maker, somebody who will buy and sell all corporate bonds. Today, as we know, most corporate bonds, I mean, very few retail investors invest in corporate bonds. Most of the investment in corporate bonds happen through mutual funds or happen through the banks, etc. Basically, it's an institutional market. Uh, an, a market maker, an institutional market maker with fairly uh, a fairly sized balance sheet would be in a position to give liquidity and therefore generate interest. This is very important because I think in debt securities, apart from whatever is available uh, today, we need more choice and it deepens the market. One of the big things is, why is it only for corporate bonds? Today, even G6, the government securities market, is not really retail. We haven't really seen anybody take, retail exposure. I think uh, that should also happen. The retail participation in government securities market should also happen. And I think this steps taken together, okay, I think the overall investor protection and promotion umbrella, the thought behind this is that in order to deepen the financial markets, it is important to promote investor protection. Investors should feel safe with financial products. And I think this umbrella of things that the finance minister has announced, and I'm sure there would be other things as well, is a very, very great thought. Key, of course, as I have written, the key is in implementation and in time-bound implementation. So we will hope that this gets implemented at a reasonable speed. One other item that I think might not be of direct interest, but the increase in insurance sector, the holding of foreign holders to 74%. I think what that will do is that it will bring lots of products that exist in the world today, which are probably still not come to India. And these will typically be risk-based products because I think the investment products are already there. It's the risk-based products, and some of those risk-based products are pretty good. They are very important for India, and I think that will get a boost. On the consumer facing side, I don't know how much would happen because of this, but definitely I think this is a great step that has been taken, and which will boost the ability of the insurance sector to act as a vehicle to funnel long term savings into the financial markets. Some two changes I think that have been done. One is with Mr. Rao touched upon the high value ULIP, removing the tax exemption on the maturity value of high value ULIPs, or removing the tax exemption on the interest for higher contribution to the government provident fund or the employee provident fund. I think it's a positive. I think what it does is that it removes what I call lazy investing. You know, when things are tax sheltered, you know, people have this lazy habit. It forces you to think about investment choices, and I think active investment choices, making them after a thought through process, is always a better idea than going with what is easily available and is a no brainer. If you will see the general trend, you haven't seen issues of tax free bonds in the last, I think, at least 3 or 4 years. No fresh issue of tax free bonds has come. So one by one you are going to see that high value investors would have to actively manage their investments, and they cannot just invest it in a tax free environment. At the same time, this does not affect the lower and the middle class investors. The other interesting thing which might be of interest to those of you who have come from overseas and have large retiral accounts overseas, uh, which, you know, once you come to India, because after you become resident in India, it becomes taxable in India. I think the proposed change will make sure that the taxation becomes the same point as what it would be taxed in that other country, and therefore you will be able to claim credit for the tax that you pay in that country. So I mean, a good reference point is the 401ks or the IRA accounts in the US. There are similar accounts in many other countries. This is a very, very useful thing, very long-standing demand, and it is the sign that this government is listening. And I think this is a great sign. This aids reverse brain drain, which is happening anyways, but this was one of the things that prevented it, and I think taking care of it is a great idea. So I'm just going to cover some of the tax proposals in a little bit more detail, and I'm not going to take too much time over this. I'm actually going to raise more issues than answer questions. So if you look at this removal of exemption from high premium ULIPs, please remember this applies only to ULIPs issued after 1st February 21. Okay, it would cover, so this cannot be avoided by breaking it up into multiple policies. That part has been clearly been plugged. Okay, how it will be done, that is still not clear. How will the insurance companies know that, you know, you have taken policies from multiple places, and therefore on an overall basis your annual premium is 2.5 lakhs and more, and therefore on maturity they are required to deduct tax? All that is still to be fleshed out. uh, Interestingly, what will get taxed? The profits and gains. How that will be calculated, what will be treated as cost, that is still to be prescribed. And they have assumed that it is going to be long term. I think the underlying basic assumption seems to be that it is underlying, which is not a wrong assumption, because simply because ULIP does not allow any encashment before 5 years. But there can be cases where that is not possible. There could be losses. I mean, ULIPs, as you know, you participate in the market, and there can be a loss. And if there is a loss in a high premium ULIP, that would be allowed to be set off like any other capital loss. Again, the ULIP, whether it is equity or whether it is non-equity, the ULIP can have a fund that is an equity oriented fund. The definition of what constitutes an equity oriented fund within a ULIP is the same as what it is for mutual funds today. I mean, that's very quickly 65% of the amount if it is invested in domestic equities, or there is a specific provision for a fund of funds that invests in a equity ETF. Same way this will be defined, and long-term gain from equity funds within the ULIP will be taxed at 10% without indexation, of course. Short-term gains, whether there will be any, we don't know. But short-term gains on the equity-oriented fund, they will not be able to get the special rate of 15% because no provision has been made in that section 111A. Very, very clearly, short-term gains on equity-oriented fund will be taxed like any other short-term gain. Any gains on non-equity oriented funds in a ULIP, they would be taxed in accordance with normal. So short term would be taxed at the regular rates, long term would be 20% post indexation. So very interesting thing is that whatever they prescribe now on how to calculate these profits and gains, this would be very useful to solve one of the debates that we have been having in the investment advisory circles and the tax circles on how to find out and under what head to tax these ULIPs or even traditional policies that are not taxable. You are aware that if the annual premium exceeds 10% of the 10% of the sum assured, then those policies are not exempt. And for that, how to calculate? I think this would serve as a good, a very good measure. Again, even NPS, Tier 2, all these are things that it would be interesting. Quick thing on the removal of exemption. Obviously, it will discourage large contributions, and the finance minister talked about people who have put in tens of lakhs into their contribution. It's not very clear as yet, and it is to be prescribed how interest on interest will be calculated, because it's not just the first year's interest on the additional contribution. It is the interest on that interest in later years also that will not be tax free. So lots of changes would need to be done in the way EPFO or the government provident fund data is shown to the subscribers. And obviously, those employees who are contributing more than 20,000 or 21,000 a month, they should get an option to restrict it to 21,000 without in any ways affecting the employer's liability to give more, because that continues to remain exempt up to 12% of the basic. This is more relevant also for the government provident fund, where the liability is statutory. In the private sector, it is part of the cost to company, so it may not matter. But in the government sector, it is very important. I think this we have already covered, that this is a great boon. I then come to two things very quickly about which are touted as benefits, but I don't think so. So you talk about this not requirement of filing returns for citizens above 75 years. But look at the hurdles. Age has to be greater than 75 years. Only pension income must be from a bank that is notified. So it's not necessary that every pension paying bank will be notified. Only income should be interest income from that bank. So pension plus interest income from that bank only. Even a single rupee of income from any other source, let's say he's put some money in PMY Vandana Yojana, that person is now ineligible for this relief. And most importantly, the first thing I look at is the commercials. It is the responsibility is on the bank. They are required to take into account the declarations that the person would make and deduct tax. Now, why would they do it? Somebody has to pay them for doing it. Would the pensioner pay them or would the government? Government very unlikely. The other thing is this, pre-filled form. We all seem to think that it is a great benefit. It is. It is a great benefit for cross-checking. But the issue is, if the department does not have the correct data, they have said that they will pre-fill the amount of cap gains also. Now, where are they going to get the cost data from? Now, suppose from some source they get the cost data, which might be incorrect. In the return, obviously you will fill in the correct data, but now the department will have a mismatch between the data it has, which was incorrect, and your data in the return, which is correct. But because there is a mismatch, there will now be a scrutiny of your returns, which otherwise in the past would not have happened. So this pre-filling of data is a mixed blessing. I mean, it's a great for checking up whatever you have done, making sure that you take it into account, but it can also lead to issues. So I hope some of the things I have mentioned uh, were helps you in making sense of this path breaking budget. But again, as I said, this is a hugely promising budget, and we look forward to the coming year with great hope and vigor.
Thank you so much, Harsh sir. It's indeed very thought-provoking. You can stop sharing that, then we can get you here. Then we'll have a lot of questions to you. And thank you so much, sir. It's really interesting, and a few things which you raised, you rightly put it. It's more than answering the questions. It will also raise the concerns, like for example, how EPF. Probably let us see once the financial bill, whether it gets through or because of the anomalies, complications, they may remove it. We don't know. We need to wait for it and look forward. And since you spoke for long, I thought I'll invite Amit ji. I can give a rest for a few minutes for you to then I have some questions to Amit ji. Amit ji, I think, having heard Harsh ji and having seen the earlier presentation and having gone through the many a times on the union budget, this budget of 2021 being hailed is one of the, as one that would be bring back the economy on the growth path. But, how do you look at, what is your views on that? How do you see this budget as far as economy is concerned?
So I think what Harsh sir mentioned in during his presentation is there's this famous saying called "never waste a good crisis," and that's precisely what this government seems to have done. And to the extent that somebody also mentioned that this is a counter-cyclical budget. When the GDP growth has GDP is contracted, the growth has turned negative. At that time, government has taken steps to increase the expenditure. Logical thinking could have been, if the income goes down, cut down on the expense. But here, there are only three constituents that spend to revive the growth in the economy, which is households, companies, and government. And government had to take the lead. So to that extent, I think there's a bold move. Having said that, they also are proposing amendment to the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act so that they can allow the deficit to expand, which has already happened actually. I mean, there's no choice. But the moment the hanging sword of fiscal deficit was off their head, they could take certain bold measures. And really, it does take a lot of courage to take this kind of steps. But it is also very thoughtful budget that focuses on capital expenditure and ensuring that the growth is long-term and sustainable rather than only focusing on immediate recovery. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Amit. I think, definitely it's a pragmatic and progressive budget, and rightly put it by you and Harsh, sir. Never waste the crisis. Crisis is an opportunity. And now I'll turn to Harsh, sir. Harsh, sir, like, you spoke on personal finance, you spoke on the taxation, but, this year there is no change in the personal tax, income tax in this budget. Yet there is not much of a disappointment across. And how do you look at the status quo on the tax treatment, and what that you advise audience on the tax planning this year differently?
So I think two things. One, I think we are in for a long period of stability on tax rates. Okay, and I think this year very clearly there was, I would say, a sigh of relief actually, because any change that was expected was to load on more taxes. I doubt there was anybody except a hugely wild optimist who was hoping for relief on taxes. So I think to that much extent, this is okay. And I think this is what we are going to see in future as well. On tax planning, I think sort of the point is that this is never, I think people tend to think of tax planning as a one-time event. So, as you rightly mentioned right at the beginning, that you start thinking of tax planning in January, February, and March. Okay. And you even have people thinking of tax planning on March 31st. I mean, tax planning comes last in this vehicle. Your goals, your your risk appetite, your risk profile, the resources available. Based on all this, you decide on a certain asset allocation. Within that asset allocation, then all that tax planning does is it enhances your return, nothing else. Within that asset allocation, you decide whether it is the fixed income portion of your asset allocation or the equity portion of your asset allocation that you want to enhance returns with. And depending on where that allocation is fitting, you decide. And you are absolutely right. I mean, ELSS is one of the best ways to enhance returns on equity investments. But obviously, it has to come out of a pre-decided equity allocation. You don't do tax planning for tax planning's sake. You do tax planning to enhance your overall investment
Return.
This is fabulous, sir. I think, friends, the tax planning is always, it is not become taxing you, rather it should benefit you. How you can save more, and how you can invest appropriately, and how that can create a wealth in the long run. That's where you need to look at, and you need to optimize every possible opportunity you have to save. And at the same time, you can maximize every possible way you can create wealth. That's where you get your personal financial advisor makes all the difference. Uh, Now, thanks for that wisdom, sir. Thanks for sharing that. And Amitji, here is a question for you. Is on the again, I'll come to you most of the times on the market, because you talk markets are on the roller coaster ride, and your book says the roller coaster ride. And now markets on the roller coaster ride on the very top end. It's I've reached to the top, and the markets are wholeheartedly welcomed this budget, and I've seen the sharp rise. Even today, at the third day, there is a upward momentum. And how do you look at this sharp rise in the equity markets? And the follow-up question is, what investors need to do now?
So equity markets typically move based on hope, and the hope the steps taken in the budget or the proposals announced in the budget should see the revival in the economic growth. And if that's the assumption, then obviously what we see in the market is quite understandable. But is this the highest point, or is this the lowest point? That's a question which has always puzzled people, and I don't think anybody has got an answer to this question. In fact, roughly around a year back, Sensex had hit an all-time high number of around 42,000 points. And post that, the pandemic broke out, the markets came down. Now, till the time the announcement, till the time coronavirus was not announced as a pandemic by the WHO, the market was quite jubilant and people felt that it will continue to go up. But when the fall happened, a significantly large number of people started believing that there's only one way down now. So market always keeps surprising. We also discussed in the past that in March 25th, when the Sensex hit the bottom, 23rd or 25th, that time we had roughly 600 cases of coronavirus, and the market hit the bottom. But end of the year, market was at the peak and we had close to 1 crore cases. So when the cases went up, the Sensex went up. So equity market is moving in hope and not exactly the way the things are happening. And to that extent, I would say simply focus on your personal situation, all the investors. Look at your goals, your risk-taking ability, risk appetite, and then arrive at how much money should be invested in which asset category, popularly known as asset allocation. Harsh already discussed about this particular point, and stick to that allocation, which means if the equity markets have run up too fast, too soon, too much too soon, in such a case, you have an opportunity to rebalance your portfolio weightages such that you sell some part of your equity portfolio and get into fixed income. That's all that one is required to do, nothing beyond that. Trying to guess what is likely to happen is an impossible job.
Thanks, Amit ji, for that. I mean, it's true, but there is an euphoria at this point of time. I will move to Harsh sir. Harsh sir, taking the cue from Amit, and the post budget, in the budget has started focusing on certain sectors. And is it the time for I'm talking on the equity portfolio side as an investment advisor, what you advise on the portfolio? Is it the time to readjust, or people need to relook at some allocations very differently? And what that one must keep in mind on their equity allocations now?
So I think that's a very important thing, and I'm just take on from what Amit said. Okay, nobody can predict whether the market is at its highest or whether it is at its lowest, right? Uh, if you can't do that, you can do the next best thing. You can plan in advance what percentage of your assets you want to be in equity, what percentage of your assets you want it to be in debt, what in gold, what in whatever are the asset classes available to you. Foreign equity, now you have so many asset classes. The point is you can also decide the triggers when you will reallocate. So you can decide that if this goes out of alignment by 2% or 5%, then I will reallocate. That's a great way. You can decide I will not do anything, I will reallocate once a year, twice a year. Okay, my point is pre-decide. If you have pre-decided and then you act as per your pre-decision over long term, over 8 or 10 years, okay, you will not go wrong. And all empirical studies show that. It is this quest, for maximizing your returns. Okay. So the analogy that I would like to give is, this is not a 100-meter dash that you have to win. This is a marathon that you have to finish. And that is why it is the goal that is important. The time it took for you to complete that is not that important. You have to keep your focus on the goal and what will enable you to reach that goal. And therefore, to answer your question, although that was a rather long-winded answer, how to allocate your assets in the current scenario? Have you pre-decided? If you have not, if you have pre-decided, act as per the pre-decision. If you have not, I think today is a good time to set up a plan. You can set it up yourself, consult your financial advisor, set it up so that next time when this happens, when the markets drop like it did on March 3rd, or like now when the market is rising up every day, you will not be worried about what to do. You have already decided what you will do. So I think you should do it now. It's again, just like for the government, it is a shame to waste a good crisis. For you, it is a shame to waste a good opportunity. This is when markets are high, there is a great opportunity to look at reallocation and be able to decide on reallocation.
That's fantastic, sir. I think, friends, I think as Archie said, rebalancing and looking at your asset allocation now is the most important one. But any questions which is coming to you, please put it on the Q&A. We will take it forward. And Amit ji, I'll move a little bit equity to debt now. And now there is a debt market has given little room again. There is an expectation that interest rates may move up, looking at the fiscal deficit which is high, and there could be an inflationary pressures may come over a period of time. In this time, with this kind of approach, how one need to look at debt side, because on the equity side we always come, we are ready for some ups and downs, but on the debt side, first of all, we are the interest rates, the yields have come down, and even small changes, there will be a negative side of the returns on the overall portfolio. What one need to approach?
So first of all, I'll divide the investing community into two parts, especially those who are using debt funds. One who are reasonably good, they understand the debt markets, and the others who do not really understand debt markets as well. My primary question to the second category of investors would be, what is the purpose of debt funds in your portfolio? And most likely the answer is going to be safety and liquidity. So if you want safety and liquidity, look at a high quality portfolio in terms of credit rating with a maturity profile which is short term. So look at a liquid or ultra short or low duration kind of funds. I'm only talking about the categories, and keep money there after checking the credit rating profile. And in such case, you need not worry too much about the changes in the interest rate movements. The second category that, and I can see Harsha smiling, is the arbitrage fund category, which is also something that you may want to look at. But keep the time horizon in mind. If your time horizon is 1 month or so, then look for liquid funds. If your time horizon is 2, 3, 4 months, then ultra short term kind of fund is good, but arbitrage fund is good when the horizon is 1 year or longer. So this is what this is how I would say. Now let's come to the first category of investors who know. Now, by knowing, I'm assuming that they know that debt markets also carry certain amount of risk, especially when you try to extract higher return from debt markets. That's where the risk goes higher. So if you understand how much risk you are taking, then fair. Then go ahead and plan it accordingly. But otherwise, I would still say go more towards the safety part. If you can predict the interest rate movement, go short right now. If you are expecting interest rates to move up, go on the longer maturity if you are expecting the interest rates to go down. I mean, it can't get simpler than that. In terms of speaking, it can only get extremely difficult when it comes to execution.
Yeah, thank you, Amit. Thank you so much for that. Harsh sir, I'll come back to you when you said asset allocation, rebalancing. But now while rebalancing based on the goals is fantastic, but as we look at a decade ahead is looking very promising for India, and equity markets looks to be, as of now, will give a better returns, and that's one asset class looks to be outperforming. At this point of the time, while you are reallocating or rebalancing, do you advise for your investors or our audience to take little more risk, and this is the time to add risk to your portfolio calculatedly? What is your suggestion to the audience?
So my point is, there cannot be one single answer to this question. It will depend on person to person and depends on what the money is for. Okay, so I am assuming that we are talking about whosoever that person is, we are talking about the equity portion, on whatever basis it has been decided. It has been decided that this portion is meant for equity, right? So obviously now is not the time to, just because the markets have run up, if that portion has become more than what you had budgeted, you can reallocate. Otherwise, obviously, you stay put. Okay. Uh, should you change what portion you should allocate? I would not do that simply based on the fact that things are looking promising. Because this, as you know, Amit famously has written a book on, this is a roller coaster ride. When you are at the top, everything looks great. And then when the ride starts going down, okay, it's your heart is in your mouth and then it rises again. So the point is that these are necessary market cycles. I don't think you should make a portfolio difference based on that. Having said that, I think one great innovation that the mutual fund industry has come out with are this category called dynamic equity funds, okay, where the allocation between equity and debt is decided based on an objective formula. Now, each mutual fund would have its own formula. It is supposed to be an objective formula. Then within equity, obviously, they will choose which equity to take, but at least the allocation is very objective. I think that's a great innovation for times like this when it is difficult for you to take a call whether we've reached the heights, whether we'll go further. And so this is the alternative that you go in to a dynamic equity fund where the allocation to equity will depend on the formula that the particular mutual fund house has for that scheme, and keep adjusting on its own. You don't have to do it. It's not driven by the greed and fear cycle. It is driven by the formula that is laid down in the scheme document.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for bringing that dynamic asset allocations or balanced advantage funds as a category which can help you all. You don't need to worry about it. The fund manager will manage about the asset allocation, and it can have an auto asset allocation. I recall some time back, I was in Nepal, one of the Ayurvedic doctor where we stayed, he was talking to us. Three things you ought to avoid in your life is hurry, worry, and curry. You know, even for the stock market investing, when markets are going up, don't worry, don't hurry that you need to change the asset allocation. At the same time, don't get the curry, the spice up at this point of time. Let it cool down and be with your advisor. Now I'll shift it to you, Amit ji. I mean, you always talk about personal finance lessons, and this now having the union budget laid down, and we know that government plans for the next fiscal, and we are aware now, as Harshji said earlier, and the government said, I'll not change the taxes too often. Now we know every year we need to worry, how I need to relook, and now I can plan very comfortably. This is my tax liability. This is what exactly will come in. And as my income goes, my tax will go up, and this life has become. But what are the personal finance lessons one can draw from this budget, and they can use to create their own personal budget for their personal finances?
So I would say two things have happened according to me in this year's budget. One thing is unlike the 1991 crisis, as Harsha was mentioning, that was our self goal. I mean, we had created the crisis, whereas this crisis is an imported crisis. It came from the world to India. Now, in that case, instead of looking at the problems of the world, the finance minister decided to look inward and did whatever was in her powers to revive the economy. And I think that's where the whole theme of Atmanirbharta speaks about. When it comes to personal finance, I would say copy this behavior. And we've been speaking many times on many platforms. Both of us have said personal finance is personal first and finance later. So look at your own situation, look at your own problems, your needs, your goals, your dreams, your risk-taking ability, and then decide your own budget, decide your own plan, and follow that to the T. So that's one lesson. The second lesson is very similar to, again, I mean, Harshad beautifully explained about the roller coaster, that when it's on the top, things look great and you get jubilant, and then the descent starts. The roller coaster of financial markets is the nature of the market. But the roller coaster that the investor should be aware of is the roller coaster that goes on inside the mind. And that roller coaster is where one needs to act counter-cyclical. So what this government has done is, when the income has gone down, GDP is the income of the country. When the income has gone down, they have increased the expenses, which is a counter-cyclical, counter-intuitive kind of step. Uh, Again, I would not say that whenever the income goes down, you should start spending more money. But what they've done is very wisely uh, increase the capital expenditure, which is the investment, rather than the
Is the internet got stuck? I think there could be some network
revenue
issue.
expenditure.
Yeah.
Number two, be very careful and cut down on the expenses is what I would say. So try to act counter-cyclical.
Fabulous. I think it's a great personal finance lessons to follow. Spend on your capital expenditure and look at bring your expenses down, and what you can focus is on yourself. And it is Atmanirbhar Bharat to Atmanirbhar of self, self-reliant. Now I'll move to Harsh sir. Harsh sir, like some of the audience are coming from other countries too. This is for the non-resident Indians. What are some important measures or what you suggest for NRIs? Of course, we are soon going to have a exclusive sessions running, a series of sessions. We request you to be part of addressing NRIs, not only on the Money Gurukul platform, on many other platforms where we look at and what you suggest.
So I think NRIs are a very, very important part of, and a very important reason why India is the strong nation that it is today, and why it will be far stronger in the future. Look at what the NRI population has done for us. We are proud of what the Indian population or Indian origin people have achieved throughout the world, not just in the US of A, in almost every country, whether it is the corporate world, whether it is the cultural world, whether it is the social sector, not for profit sector. I think the kind of work that the Indian diaspora has done, they made us proud. And I think now, over the last few years, our own infrastructure, whether it is the making things easier for them when they want to return, the overseas citizens of India, the whole OCI card, and making that so simple now. An OCI card holder effectively can do everything that an Indian can do. He can come into India at any time. He can work. For some strange reason, he cannot be in the research business. But other than that, he or she can do everything that an Indian citizen can do without any approvals. Uh, and I think the tax regulation, including the recent one that is given in terms of coinciding the tax impact of retiral benefits, which it tends to be huge. We don't understand, because look at a professional who's been overseas and who probably has a $500,000 or a one. Just to put it in Indian currency, we say talk of 3 crores or 4 crores of rupees lying in his 401k account in the US. Now he comes to India, comes for good, and he wants to settle in India, wants to run his business in India, set up a business or set up a manufacturing activity in India. If he becomes resident in India, once he becomes a resident in India, he is required to pay tax on his global income. Now in the US, on the 401k, the tax is payable only when he withdraws. So he is not worried. He lets it ride there. But in India, moment he becomes resident, as a resident, he is liable to pay tax on his global income, and on his global income, the accrued income inside the 401k. So today he had to pay that tax on an accrual basis. Then on a withdrawal basis, when he pays that tax in the US, because he has already paid it in India, he just does not, there is no credit available in India, because the tax payment happens in the US much later. Now by coinciding, okay, this is something that works very well. You have several schemes that the government has announced, whether it is the returning foreign Indian currency schemes, whether the ability to continue with the FCNR deposits, etc. I think there are several schemes that are there, uh, that NRIs, to make life easy for the returning NRIs, and even for those NRIs who continue to stay overseas. I think the tax treatment in India of their various investments is quite beneficial and in line with the ability for them to be able to get double taxation credits in their respective countries.
Thank you so much for the detailed answer, sir. I know you are an authority on NRI space.
Absolutely.
We always, I think, I have not find someone who is as authority as you when understanding the NRIs in terms of the taxation and the overall on the rule based, including the FCNR kind of it. And thanks to this government, not only the ease of doing the business, now ease of investing for the NRIs. This budget too added something. It's really good. Somebody said to me, NRIs now we can redefine NRIs as a NRI, now returns to India, not non-resident Indian. It's and with this, I'll come to you, Amit ji. Very controversial question. It's normally a journalist can ask this, but I am just putting it to you. There is one question after every budget: does this budget leave common man richer or poorer?
That's an interesting question. And as you rightly said, it's a very tricky question to answer. But I think whether to remain poor or be poor or become wealthy, let not the union budget decide it. The budget is a given. It is the government's budget and not my budget or your budget. And they had to do it based on their priorities, their requirements, etc., etc. Now, given the budget, now it is up to us. How do we make use of this budget and become wealthier or become poorer? So the choice is on us. The actions that we take based on whatever is given is entirely up to us. So I think that's what I would say. And to some extent, the budget also says it's about Atmanirbhar Bharat. So whether to become wealthy is also up to us. Be Atmanirbhar and let's be wealthy.
Fabulous. Sir, when having seen, you would have seen budgets over last 30 years and analyzing every time and addressing many sessions. What is that one thing stands out in this budget which you felt it's like, which is according to you, which can be on the personal finance side for the people, it's very useful, or for the nation side, it is literally, it is outstanding?
So I think it's much easier to answer on the personal finance side, because I think very clearly the attention to investor protection, that is something I've never seen. Okay, I was pleasantly surprised at the mention of the investor charter, as I mentioned in my presentation. So I think overall there is a realization that uh, investor faith in the financial markets is a cornerstone, and that is a huge hygiene requirement for deepening our markets and being Atmanirbhar. So today, our stock markets, if you remember just 5 years or 10 years ago, it used to be dependent on the mood swings that the financial institution investors had. Today, thanks to the immense work done primarily, I would say, by the mutual fund industry with the mutual fund Sahi Hai campaign, I think today we have 8,000 crores. That's not a small sum of money anywhere in the world. It's primarily retail. 8,000 crores, I mean, give or take 100, 200 crores here. Every month, religiously, through ups, through downs, that money is coming into the market. Somebody to me, while I was having a conversation, described that as dumb money. Well, if this is dumb money, the only thing I can say, being dumb is smart.
It's smart.
So be dumb.
Absolutely, sir. The mutual funds, when you come through the SIP way, it is sometimes it's boring, you automate it, but honestly, you automated your creating of wealth. I think that dumb money, you don't worry about the market cycles. You are sitting there, the asset class, which can give you a great return to you. Of course, markets are always volatile. There are periods of more return. There is a periods of low return. There is a periods of reasonably good returns. but when you stay dumb and you make it. In fact, the analysis says the dead investors made more money than the live investors in the act, because you are more active than you are not. Your returns will become passive for you. I think it's a fantastic thing to look at. Now I'll come to you, Amit ji, and probably this question can be the last before I take the people on these questions, on the answers. I mean, what is that one thing you wished in the budget? I mean, would contain, which is happened, and which is no, which you felt it could have, this budget could have got something more for the personal finance.
I think one of the things which this budget did not mention at all, though in the the year gone by, during a couple of announcements, it was taken care of. But this budget, probably the budget was not the right occasion. I don't know. The people who have suffered in terms of loss of job or drop in income, there's nothing for those people in specifically for this people in this budget. I think some of the proposals which were announced earlier as, as relief measures, those could have been continued, and that would have that's one of the things that I wish the government could have done. But otherwise, I think for overall for the economy, if growth comes back, I think the government is hoping that the jobs would come back. But till then, they need support. So that's all I have to say.
Great, sir. And now I'll go through the audience questions. The first question, sir, for you is, what is the difference? This is coming from Vruddhi, and what is the difference between ULIP and mutual funds? And the coverage offered under ULIP is low as an investment in majority. Is it right?
Okay, so if I understand right, the question is that the life insurance coverage provided in a ULIP plan is low. That is the question that uh, she has asked. So I think most ULIPs today, except if they are, targeted at slightly elder people above 50 or 55, most ULIPs allow you to have or have minimum cover of 10 times anyways, okay, so that the tax exemption is maintained. Now whether 10 times is sufficient or not, one does not know. You are right, uh, the coverage may not be sufficient for you, it is dependent on you. As to the difference between ULIP and a mutual fund, I think a ULIP is a mix of term insurance plus a mutual fund. So part of the money that you pay goes towards getting a term insurance for you. The balance part gets invested in a mutual fund managed by, so I'm saying mutual fund only in the sense that it is a mutual fund like instrument with units, etc., into the kind of fund that you would have indicated. And most ULIPs have similar to, they would have debt funds, they would have mixed hybrid funds, they would have G-Secs, they would have equity, they would have large cap, small cap. So all kinds of choices would be available, and you can choose the fund into which it will be invested, just like a mutual fund, and you will get the benefit or the loss. You share in the benefit or the loss. So I think that, and of course, the mutual funds are regulated by SEBI, and ULIPs are regulated under the overall umbrella of IRDA. One important difference, I think the mutual fund industry, whether it is reporting, whether it is coverage, whether it is research and analysis, I think it has traveled a long distance in the last 20 years. And I think in the mutual fund industry, we have reached global standards, and probably in many cases, we are better than
Better than
whereas I think it has evolved even in the ULIPs in the insurance sector, but I think it still has some time to catch up to the level of evolution that the mutual fund industry has reached.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for that answer. Audience, please use the Q&A box for all your questions. I'll continue to take your questions from Amit ji and Harsh ji. Harsh ji, follow-up question on this ULIP only is coming to you. The ULIPs now, since don't have a tax-free benefits, what should I do with my existing ULIPs?
So this does not affect your existing ULIPs. Okay, unless you bought it on 1st February. Okay, so any ULIPs you had in the past, if they were exempt, they will continue to remain exempt. So I think one of the good things that the finance minister has done, even in other procedural aspects also, uh, is that genuinely they have gone by not making changes that impact existing investments or existing actions. So very clearly, if your ULIP was exempt and it was bought before 1st February, it will continue to remain exempt.
Okay, thank you, sir. Amit, this question coming to you. I mean, post budget, looking at the market going up, should I enhance my allocation to the equity more, or do I need to step up my SIP?
I think we already covered it a couple of times earlier. No need to make any changes just because some proposals have been announced in the union budget. Go back and do once again based on your review frequency, but don't treat budget as something where you keep making changes in your portfolio. That's not the purpose of union budget. Union budget is presentation of government's accounts. It's not your portfolio review.
Okay. Harsha, this is a question to you is on the PF. What about my PF? Should I stop allocating additional voluntary contribution? Should I stop it?
So that will really depend. Again, as I said, and I repeat what Amit says. I mean, you can. So you would have allocated something to. I'm assuming that you went through that action, that you planned your allocation, and as a plan of that allocation, you decided to put more in the EPF as a voluntary contribution, because out of that debt it gave you 8. Even once it is taxable, please remember, even assuming you are in the highest tax bracket, even after tax, even now you will get 5%. Okay, so it's not as if it has become zero. It's not as if it's become a bad investment. So please look at a plan. And if you don't have a plan, make a plan. Okay, I mean, that is the only answer that I can give. Uh, all that the tax has done is it has reduced your return. If that impacts your asset allocation, you have no other place. If you were anyway to put it in debt, okay, is there an increasing equally, risk similar but higher return? So if you have anyway supposed to allocate to debt, what's your choice? So you have no choice. So I think make a plan to all these questions. Don't try to time. Don't move your money from one to the other depending on what tax breaks happen. They will keep happening. Please have a plan. And if you don't have a plan now, make one now.
Get it.
Thank you so much, sir. Amit ji, this question is coming to you. I'm investing in ELSS year after year, but I had an habit to withdraw it once in 3 years after the maturity. What do you suggest now? I should not withdraw, but now most of my 3 years returns for my market is looking very good. What is that I need to do with my ELSS portfolio?
So if I'm investing in ELSS only for the purpose of tax saving, I think that's a wrong choice. In a couple of seminars, people came and asked me, young boys came and asked me, sir, I want to reduce tax. What should I do? I said, I have a completely legally, morally, ethically correct solution to your requirement. Stop earning, no income, no tax. So then they said, but that's not the purpose. Yeah, exactly. Tell me the purpose. Tax saving has to be incidental to that main purpose. Choosing ELSS, the main purpose is it's an equity mutual fund. The purpose is wealth creation over a long period of time. So if you are choosing ELSS for wealth creation, use it that way. Incidentally, it also gives you a tax benefit which enhances your returns. Harsha mentioned about the return enhancement. through tax planning. So this is exactly what is happening now. If you keep doing this in and out from ELSS, I think you are missing out on a bigger benefit, which is wealth creation over a period of time. I mean, you yourself have created a humongous amount of wealth only through that one vehicle called ELSS, apart from, of course, the other portfolio. But you've seen it yourself. So my sense is use ELSS for the purpose of wealth creation, and additionally, because it offers tax benefit, take it. Don't change it once every 3 years. That's not something that I would ever recommend.
Thank you so much for that answer, sir. I personally feel I met quite a good number of investors who are with ELSS over a period of 25 years, and they save to the maximum possible on their tax saving. Today,
Yeah.
most of them, their portfolios are looking, above a crore kind of it. It's like it's a fantastic
Yeah,
wealth
exactly.
creation. They felt their money is equal more than what they got elsewhere, and that is a sticky money. And here is a very interesting question coming from an investor, one of the audience. Sir, what he says is, I stopped my SIPs during pandemic time, and I look like now I lost the bus. Do I need to restart, or what do you advise me?
So the answer to that question, again, I sound like a stuck record. Why were you doing the SIP in the first place? It was a part of your plan. If it was part of your plan, you would not have stopped. So it's very clear you're not there, don't have a plan. And the key issue, just to give you some data, if you look at Nifty, okay, and assume that you have done a 10-year SIP in the Nifty, okay, you could have started at any time, and obviously done 120 months of Nifty, okay. There, at the end of 10 years, there is not a single instance when you would have ended negative. Okay. Unfortunately, because of the precipitous fall on 23rd March, that is the series, starting 23rd March 2010, ending 23rd March 2020, when the least return comes, which is just about 1%. But even that SIP, just 1 month before, was giving 8.5%. In a single month, it fell 33-34%. And because of that, the overall return fell to 1%. The average return on the SIP is, roughly about 13 to 14% on the Nifty. That is one. Two, you combine getting in systematically. If you combine that with getting out systematically, and that happens if you have a goal. If you don't do it, when you have a goal coming up, maybe 2 years before the goal coming up, you start tapering your investment. If you had done that, 8 years of SIP, 2 years of tapering out, 124th installment going out into a debt fund, your minimum return is 9% per annum. So my point is, please do things systematically. Don't take decisions based on emotions. Invariably, you will take wrong decisions, as you have taken. You have realized it now. At least now, please make a plan. While you make a plan, to the extent you want to increase your asset allocation, do a SIP in a equity fund. I presume that's what you want to do. This time, don't stop. Please remember, in a SIP, it is when the market is down, is when your wealth is getting created, because it works on the principle that you will get more units when the market is down. If you're going to stop it at that time, you are actually destroying your, and I hope you recognize that. But equally important is to have a plan. I cannot be more emphatic on the need for a plan.
Fantastic answer, sir. It's SIPs, SIP hai wo, stay invested permanently. So you, it's not not the we also call it the simple investment plan where you can truly become rich. I think that's a better way to look at. Amitji, this question is coming to you. I mean, now I need to rebalance my asset classes, and one of the asset classes I have an exposure to the gold. Now is it the time I need to reduce the exposure to the gold?
Typically, I am just trying to give a different variation of the same answer. typically you look at your portfolio whenever you are doing a review. What was the desired percentage of your portfolio that you wanted to invest in a particular asset class? So typically, many financial advisors recommend that around 5 to 10%, and sometimes based on the need, it could be different. But so let's say 5% of your portfolio is supposed to be in gold, and today when you are reviewing and you see that the gold allocation has gone up to 6%, then you need to pare down that 1%, reduce it, and bring it back to 5%. Suppose that it's gone down to 4%, then take money out from somewhere which is on a higher side and shift back to gold, bring it back to that percentage. Beyond that, can I really predict the market? No, I can't predict the market. And the most disastrous way to try and predict the market is looking at the recent past and extrapolating it in the future. That's the most disastrous way. So let's not try to guess. A majority of the experts are unable to predict the future, and if the experts are so bad at predicting future, we are not even experts. So let's not even try that.
Thank you so much. And I think we will about to conclude. I think last one question to each one of you. Harshjeet, here is a question to you is taking the clue from the budget and looking at the pragmatism of this budget, looking at now I need to plan for my finances. And if you are my advisor, what you suggest to me on my broad goal planning?
For that, I will have to know you. I'll have to talk to you. I'll have to find out your risk profile. I'll have to find out what is it that you want to do. Okay, I don't think it is a making a plan is not in the end it might be an Excel sheet, but in the beginning there is a lot of input and a lot of interaction that is required client before you can recommend anything. And it is never, so it is not like a formula number 1, formula number 2, formula number 3. It is customized for each person, and which is how it should be. Every person is an individual. His needs are different, his ability to take risks are different, his resources are different. So, and I think you have to weave all that in and come up with a plan.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And I think, Amit, always we talk about a person comes before personal finance, and each of us need to plan very differently. Glad at least you are planning to plan for your goals. And I personally, I add to what Harshji said is sit with your spouse and sit with your family and to take a collective decisions and go to your financial advisor, then have these discussions and take it forward. And definitely things are looking far better, and don't waste the crisis and use this opportunity to plan for the decade to come. I think this is the time to look at. Amit ji, last, what is one advice you would like to give to the audience post budget?
I already said that, and I'm going to repeat it. Uh, the budget is Government of India's budget and not your personal budget. So you can't outsource budgeting job to the finance minister. That she'll take care of the union budget. We'll have to do our own personal budgets and decide our goals. The way she takes help of a team of secretaries and economic advisors, you can take help of your investment advisor in drawing out your budget, your goals, your plans, and execution of that. So that's the only thing that I would recommend. But it has to be personal. It cannot be, same. India's union budget cannot be the same as Russia's union budget. Similarly, Rao sir's budget cannot be same as Mr. Rungta's budget or same as Amit's budget. So each one's individual.
Fabulous, sir. You got a very accolade from the audience. It's said very well said. This is India's budget, not your personal budget, and that's fantastic. That's sir, final advice for you for the audience before I hand over to the Karan.
So my advice is very simple. I think uh, people use their personal finances to win. Okay, they want to win like everything else. We are social animals. We compare ourselves to our neighbors, our friends, our peers, and we want to be the best. We want to be the first. And I think paradoxically, this need to be the best, to be first, especially in finance, okay, is your worst enemy. Okay, take a step back. It does not matter. Your neighbor, your friend, your colleague is doing better, does not matter. How is it of importance to you? I think take a step back, look at the broader picture, then do anything that you do. Think before you act, and plan, think, plan, act. I think that is what I would like to leave people with.
Fabulous, sir. Think, plan, and act. This is a message you all can take it forward, and it is like, and I always say the message is SIP: save wisely, invest rightly, plan smartly. SIP for all of us, and it's all that we need to look at is, enhance your savings and invest it wisely. Have your right advisor, and you need to plan smartly and stay. Once you created your budget, stick to the budget. With this, I'll stop here. And once you've planned this, I think with us we have Amit ji and Harsh ji, and you have an Amit, infinite. That is what infinite prosperity, and you will be always Harsh. You will be always happy. You can invest it rightly. And with this, I hand over to Karan. Thank you so much for Amit ji and Harsh ji for your time and sparing with us. And indeed, it was a great learnings on the budget. Thanks to all the audience. I wish each one of you a happy savings and happy investing, and wish taking, and of course, take care of your health, take care of your wealth. God bless you all. I am grateful to Money Gurukul team, Karan, Viraj, and Vivek for taking us month after month sessions to across the corporates. And thank you so much. And over to you, Karan.
Thank you so much, sir. As always, it was a pleasure hearing you, hearing Mr. Trivedi, and today hearing Mr. Rungta offer their views on all things personal finance and trying to make sense of this budget, which honestly not very many people try to. And as Mr. Trivedi rightly said, it's the government's budget, not really ours. So time to draw up ours for the year ahead and to draw up our own financial plans. So thank you. I hope that leaves us with a lot of food for thought, a lot of thinking, and a lot of planning for the financial year ahead for all of us. Thank you for being part of this session of the Economic Times Money Gurukul. We look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Thank you. See you, sir, then. Thank you.